You seriously didn't get them anything." That's what I whispered to my mom in the middle of her living room while my daughter was holding back tears, and my son's face just fell. It was Christmas Day. Everyone was there, cousins, uncles, in-laws. My mom had just finished handing out her perfectly wrapped gifts to every other kid in the family. Every other kid. And then she looked at my kids, shrugged, and said loud as hell, "We didn't think they'd be comfortable with gifts this year. They're a bit too different." Different WTF does that even mean? Anyway, let me rewind a bit. I'm Nate, 38, architect. Pretty average suburban dad living outside Chicago with my wife Mel and our 2 kids, Noah and Ellie. Great kids. Noah's a little high energy, yeah, but he's 6. Ellie's 4 and super shy, takes time to open up. But when she does, she's the sweetest damn kid you've ever met. Mel and we've been together 11 years. Solid team. And for a while I really thought my parents were just quirky. Judgmental, yeah, but not cruel. Turns out I was giving them way too much credit. Growing up, Christmas at my parents' house was a big deal. The kind of Norman Rockwell stuff you see on mugs. My mom, Janet, used to go nuts decorating things snowflake garlands, 17 kinds of cookies, the whole scent of cinnamon dream. My dad, Harold, would grumble about the lights, but hang them anyway, whistling Jingle Bell Rock like he didn't care. It was magic, man. I always wanted my kids to have that same feeling. So every year since Noah was born, Mel and I drove the 40 minutes to their place packed with presents and dressed to play the part of the perfect little family. I thought if we just kept showing up being polite, they'd come around. But things started changing about, 3 or 4 years ago. First, it was subtle. Little digs. My mom would comment on Noah's energy like it was a disease. Ellie would barely be acknowledged unless she was clinging silently to Mel's leg. Mel tried so damn hard to smooth it over every year. "Your mom's just stressed," she'd say. "Let's not make a thing out of it." And I wanted to believe that. I really did. I was stuck in this weird guilt-fueled loop trying to make peace with people who hadn't earned it in a long time. Then last Christmas happened. It started off like normal. We got to their place around noon. Snow was falling lightly, so the driveway was just barely covered in white. My brother Chris was already there with his wife and their kids. Everyone was doing the usual small talk. Mel went to help my mom in the kitchen. I ended up in the den with my dad, and Chris talking about football and some dumb plumbing issue they both pretended to know how to fix. The vibe felt okay, normal-ish. I thought, hey, maybe this year won't suck. Yeah, that thought didn't even last 2 hours. After dinner came the gift exchange, and that's when shit went sideways. My mom took center stage like she always does, grabbing present after present from under the massive tree. She had everyone's name written in gold cursive. Fancy wrapping. The cousins went up first, tearing through gifts like little Tasmanian devils. Even Chris's dog got a stocking. I'm not kidding. Mel got a spa certificate and some handmade candle. Seemed nice. Then my mom picked up the last few gifts and said, "Okay, that's it for the kids this year." Noah and Ellie looked at me with the biggest damn smiles, expecting their names to be called next. But nothing. Just silence. I waited. She didn't say anything else. I cleared my throat and asked, "Where are Noah and Ellie's gifts?" My mom, standing there in her holiday apron, like she was in a Hallmark movie, looked straight at me and said, "We didn't think they'd really appreciate them this year. They just don't blend well with the other kids." I couldn't speak. I just stared. My stomach dropped. Mel turned white. Ellie hid behind her leg. Noah's mouth opened a little, but he didn't say a word. He just sat down. I was pissed. Mel, she was ready to throw down, but she didn't say anything. Just held both our kids close. My dad, the man didn't even look up from his glass of bourbon. I looked around the room. People were staring, pretending they weren't. Some looked away. My cousins shifted awkwardly. One of Chris's kids whispered, "Why didn't they get anything?" It was like time slowed down and I could hear my kids' hearts breaking right there under the twinkling lights. "Let's go," Mel said, her voice tight. "Now!" And that was it. We packed up, said a half-assed Merry Christmas on our way out. My mom called after us like we were the rude ones. I didn't look back. The car ride home was silent. Noah and Ellie fell asleep, both still holding the little bags of candy they'd brought for their cousins. Mel stared straight ahead, tears streaming quietly. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. That night, I sat at our kitchen table long after everyone else went to bed, just staring, thinking, remembering every time I fixed their appliances, paid for their plumber, picked up groceries when they were too tired, handed over cash just until the pension clears. They weren't broke, just cheap and entitled. And I was done. That was the last night I was ever going to be the good son. Fast forward to this morning. Yep, literally today. I was making pancakes for the kids, trying to pretend like my phone wasn't buzzing nonstop. I'd ignored 3 calls and 2 voicemails from one number, my mom. The 6th call, I picked it up out of morbid curiosity. Or maybe I just wanted to hear her say it out loud. "Nate, oh thank God." The roof she started, and I could already hear the drama brewing in her voice like an overboiled kettle. "It's leaking. Water's everywhere. Buckets in the living room. Your dad can't fix it, his back. Oh God, it's all gonna cave in." I didn't say anything at first, just listened. "And we really can't afford a roofer right now. They quoted us $12,000. Can you believe it? $12,000. You know how it is. Harold's pension barely covers the gas bills these days." I stirred the pancake batter slowly, calmly, dead inside. "Nate, hello. That sucks," I said, pouring batter into the pan. "Hope you figure it out." Silence. What do you mean you're not helping?" "Nope." Dead silence again. I could actually hear her blink through the phone. "I'm sorry, what? After everything we've done for you." I turned down the heat. Like what mom publicly humiliating my kids last Christmas, making them feel like crap in front of the whole family, or the years of fake kindness wrapped in strings and guilt trips. "Oh, for God's sake, Nate, you're still mad about that?" Her voice pitched up like I was being dramatic. "It was just one holiday. We didn't mean anything by it. You meant every word. You said they didn't belong. In front of everyone. You're twisting things. You're punishing us." "Damn right I am," she gasped. Full-blown Oscar-level performance. "I cannot believe you would let your parents suffer over a misunderstanding. No, you don't get to call it that. You don't get to downplay it. You don't get to skip accountability and jump to victimhood. You made your bed, lie in it, under your leaky-ass roof. Unbelievable." I laughed. "Yeah, it kind of is." I finally said no, and I hung up. Did I feel a little sick? Yeah, that's what 38 years of guilt programming does to you. But did I feel free? Oh, hell yes. Okay, now back to earlier this year. March. The fallout started way before today. See, after Christmas, we went no contact. Didn't return texts, skipped birthdays. Ellie's preschool graduation, just us and a cupcake. Noah's soccer games. Mel and me cheering solo on the sidelines. And honestly, it felt peaceful. No eggshells, no whispery critiques about how we raise our kids, no fake hugs from people who think different is a dirty word. But you know what did start happening? Random guilt packages. My mom sent books, pieces, a check for $100 with the "for Noah and Ellie" written in shaky cursive, all returned to sender. Then came the pity calls. My brother Chris reached out like the mediator he always pretends to be. "Hey man, mom feels awful." Cool. She didn't mean it like that. She said it, she meant it. "Can't you just, I don't know, move on?" "Not until my kids do." I hung up on him too. Then something unexpected happened. Mel got promoted. Yeah, my badass wife landed a creative director role at a downtown agency. Huge deal. More money, better hours, and with the stress off our backs from my parents' endless financial drains, we actually had savings for the first time in forever. We bought new bikes for the kids, signed Ellie up for dance, took a weekend trip to the Dells. It wasn't luxury, but it felt like ours. And me, I started drawing again. Like really drawing. Not just blueprints and layouts, but actual sketching. I signed up for a figure drawing class, first one in years. That first night, walking into the studio with my old pencil kit, I swear I felt like a piece of me had been dug up from the grave. That's the thing no one tells you. Boundaries don't just protect you, they unlock you. You stop surviving and start remembering who the hell you are. Anyway, back to present day. After I hung up on my mom this morning, I looked over at Noah, who was humming while drowning his pancake in syrup. and Ellie sitting cross-legged under the table feeding a piece to the cat, and it hit me like a truck. They were okay, better than okay. They were blooming. That was all the closure I needed. No revenge speech, no final showdown, just silence. And for once, I didn't fill it. Okay, so this is where things get weird. A few months ago, June to be exact, I was clearing out the storage unit we've been renting for way too long. We were finally in a place where we didn't need to keep our lives in cardboard anymore. Half the boxes were old baby clothes and mismatched Christmas decor. I almost didn't open the last one in the back. It was my granddad's stuff. Jack Parker, my mom's dad, Navy vet, bricklayer, quiet guy with sharp eyes and zero tolerance for BS. He died 5 years ago, and I'd been the one who handled most of the estate paperwork because, shocker, my parents were too overwhelmed. At the time, I just wanted it done. No drama. Just bury the man with respect. In the bottom of the box was a thin sealed manila envelope. My name was on it. Nate, if you're reading this good, you finally stopped playing nice. My heart damn near stopped. I opened it, and inside was a single page. Typed, signed, notarized. My grandfather had legally transferred a property, his old bungalow on Maple Street, to me. Except, here's the kicker. My parents had transferred it to themselves in 2005 for tax purposes. But he had reversed it. Quietly. 3 months before he died. It was mine, and they had no idea. I double-checked the deed records online. He'd done it right. Paperwork, witnesses, sealed and delivered. I sat down on the cold concrete floor of that unit and just laughed. Like a man who's been holding his breath for 20 years and finally exhales. You ever feel rage and joy and grief and peace all at once? That was me. And then it hit me, that house. That was the one with the broken roof. The one my mom had been crying about into the phone that morning. I own it. Let that sink in. They'd been calling me to fix my own property. The one they'd quietly taken used, lived in like it was owed to them. And when it started falling apart, they still expected me to pay for it without ever knowing I was now legally their landlord. Screw that. So I sat down that night and typed up a letter. Plain language. Straight to the point. Dear Janet and Harold, as of March, I am the legal owner of 4 and 15 Maple Street via transfer from Jack Parker. All documentation has been verified. You've lived there rent-free for 19 years. You've treated me like a bank, a handyman, and a doormat. That ends now. You have 60 days to vacate or begin paying fair market rent starting next month. This is not a discussion. It's a correction. Nate. I didn't send it by email. I printed it, slid it into a red envelope, and hand-delivered it to their mailbox on a Sunday morning. No signature. No knock. Just placed it in there, shut the box, and walked Dad away. On Monday morning, the text started. What is this? This is absurd. This must be illegal. How dare you do this to your own family? You can't be serious. I didn't respond, not one word. Tuesday came the voicemail from my dad. Nate, this is your father. You need to grow up. You're acting like a child. Funny. That's rich coming from the man who stood in silence while his wife humiliated our grandchildren. Wednesday. My mom called sobbing. We didn't know. Your grandfather must have. He was old, confused. He wouldn't have done that if he was in his right mind. Nah, Jack was never confused. That man knew exactly who he was handing the keys to. By Friday, a letter showed up in our mailbox from my brother Chris. Come on, man, don't do this. Mom's freaking out. Dad's depressed. They're calling lawyers. This is too far. Too far. Letting your kids cry on Christmas while you pretend they don't exist wasn't too far. Living rent-free in a house your dead father gave to me, and then demanding I fix your damn roof wasn't too far. Nah, bro, this is just far enough. I told Mel that night, sitting in our kitchen again, just like I had that Christmas evening. She was quiet. Then she said something that hit me right in the chest. You know what the best part is? You didn't even need to fight. You just stopped playing. Yeah, exactly that. No screaming, no lawsuits, no social media drama. I just handed them the consequences they worked so hard to pretend didn't exist. It was almost boring how easy it was. And that's what made it feel like justice. All right, so here's the thing. Nobody tells you once you stop catering to toxic people. They don't implode right away. First, they scramble, they get loud, they throw every guilt grenade they've got. It's like emotional warfare with your own history. About 2 weeks after the red letter, my mom showed up at my office. Yup, unannounced, uninvited, standing in the lobby like a ghost in a North Face vest. Janet Parker for Nate, the front desk girl, whispered to me wide-eyed. I walked out deadpan. She looked smaller somehow, hunched into her scarf like she was the one being attacked. Nate, please, can we talk? Not here. We stepped outside into the parking lot. Cold wind, gray sky. Perfect backdrop for a showdown I never wanted. You can't do this, she said. I already did. We raised you. You also raised me to tolerate being treated like garbage. That's not fair. No. What's not fair is watching my kids shrink under your judgment and still trying to keep the peace. What's not fair is you calling me to fix your problems while pretending I don't exist when it's inconvenient. Tears welled up. She reached for me. I took a step back. I'm not your savior anymore, Mom. You're being cruel. No, I'm being clear. She left in silence. I didn't hear from her again for 3 weeks. Then came the letters. Yeah, actual paper letters like we were in a damn 1950s drama. My dad's handwriting, blocky, angry. This isn't how families treat each other. You're cutting us off. You've become cold. All because of a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. That word again. Like we all hallucinated the Christmas snub. Like Noah and Ellie didn't sit in the back seat that day whispering, did we do something wrong? Mel saw the second letter and ripped it in half without even opening it. They only apologize when they want something she said. That's not remorse. That's strategy. She was right. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't mess with me. Because even when you go no contact, even when you're 100% justified, part of you still aches. You grieve the version of them you wanted them to be. And grief, it's sneaky. It'll have you doubting yourself in the middle of a grocery aisle because you saw their favorite cereal on sale. By mid-August, I got a text from Chris. They're out, left last night, took everything, house is empty. That was it. 19 years of history cleared out in one night. No warning, no drama, just gone. I drove over there alone the next day, just to see it. The bungalow on Maple still had Jack's old porch swing. The grass was dead. The roof still leaking. I didn't go inside. Just stood in the driveway and stared at the front door. My name on the deed. My blood in the soil. But no part of it felt like mine. That's when I realized something. I didn't want the house. I wanted closure. So I listed it. Cash buyer. No fuss. Took a small loss on repairs, but I didn't care. That place had been a wound for years. Selling it felt like cauterizing it shut. Now let's talk about what didn't happen. I didn't post about it on Facebook. I didn't tell my friends all the gory details. I didn't confront my parents at some dramatic holiday. I just ended the cycle. You know what Mel did with the check from the sale? She signed Ellie up for a year of art classes. Bought Noah a telescope. We booked a quiet cabin for Thanksgiving, just us and a fireplace. That was the first Thanksgiving in decades where I didn't end the night with a headache and a knot in my chest. About a week after the house sold, my dad called, left a voicemail. The voice that used to bark commands now sounded small. I guess it's over. You made your point. Hope you're proud of yourself. I deleted it, didn't even blink. Because yeah, Dad, I am proud. Not of hurting you, not of cutting you out, but of finally learning that peace costs something, and I was finally willing to pay the price. Then something happened I wasn't expecting. Noah asked about them. We were driving to school, windows down. He was telling me about a spider he saw on the playground. Then out of nowhere, Dad, why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa anymore? I pulled over, just stopped the car. My heart sank, but I kept my voice calm, because sometimes people say mean things and don't say sorry. And we decided not to be around that anymore. He looked at me thinking, but you said family's important. Yeah, I nodded, but being kind is more important. He smiled a little, okay. And just like that, he went back to talking about spiders. Kids get it more than we give them credit for, so now it's December again. The lights are up around the neighborhood. Plastic reindeer on every other lawn. The air smells like chimney smoke and sugar cookies. And I swear I hear Jingle Bell Rock at least 3 times a day. But this year, I'm not dragging my family to my parents' house pretending we belong in someone else's script. This year, we're staying home. No forced smiles. No side-eye from across the table. No pretending Noah's excitement is a problem. No pretending Ellie's quiet is wrong. We made our own decorations. Mel found a vintage tree topper at a thrift store. Noah made paper snowflakes and taped them to every window. Ellie drew a lopsided snowman with purple boots and named him Clarence. I framed it. It's hanging over our mantle right now. Our tree messy, overloaded. Too many ornaments from kindergarten art class. It's perfect, because this year, our house actually feels like a home. Last week, I got a card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. My mom's. Inside was a photo. My parents, Chris, his family. All of them smiling in front of a different tree. And on the back, 3 words written in ink. Still your family. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even answer, because the truth is they're not. Not anymore. See, for a long time, I thought family was something you had to endure, like some unspoken blood contract. You show up, you keep the peace, you swallow the hurt, and keep passing the mashed potatoes. But I don't believe that anymore. Family isn't who shares your name. It's who shares your values. It's who protects your kids when it counts. It's who says I'm sorry without being prompted. It's who doesn't flinch when you draw a boundary. And that's not them. You know what I've realized this past year? I'm not the good son. Never was. I was the responsible one, the useful one, the one they could lean on until I collapsed under the weight of it. And when I stopped carrying them, they called me cruel, but I wasn't. I was just done being broken for the comfort of people who refused to heal. It's been a full year now since we walked out of their house on Christmas Day. Noah's more confident. Ellie's more open. Mel laughs more. I draw almost every night, usually with Clarence the snowman watching from the mantle. The silence from my parents. At first it felt like punishment. Now it feels like freedom. I don't miss them. I miss the idea of them. The version I wish they were. But I've made peace with the gap. This morning, Noah handed me a drawing. It was our house with all 4 of us standing in front of it. He wrote family at the top in crooked letters. I put it on the fridge and said, "This is the best Christmas card I've ever seen." Because it is. So no, I didn't send a card back. I didn't write some dramatic letter or send the deed with a note saying thanks for the trauma. I just kept going. That's the real revenge. Not slamming the door, not proving them wrong. Just living better without them in the room. And you know what? It's enough. Story 2. I was interrupted by my father because I disobeyed my stepmother. Then he openly declared me a shame at my sister's wedding. I made them regret everything. Claire, my younger sister, sent me a wedding invitation. Indeed, Claire the one, the youngster with the golden hue. My stepmother and father adore me. I hadn't spoken to that person since I split off my family, which is a poisonous disaster. The sheer chutzpah, you know? Nothing for 7 years, no texts, no calls. Hello, how are things going? All of a sudden, I receive an invitation to this lavish wedding. But it was more than the invitation. Tucked inside Claire's calligraphy was a handwritten letter. It's obvious. She wrote that she wanted to make things right since she missed me. I looked at it for a long time, wondering whether this was a joke of any sort. Was she serious? Like, she wanted me back in the fold after all that transpired and the way they treated me. Let me go back a little for background. When Claire was 12 and I was 15, our mother died. You guessed it, destroyed us. However, my dad was out there moving on while I was still trying to deal with my loss. He got married again a year later. Denise, the stepmother from hell, entered. She had an underlying goal to remove any traces of my mother from the beginning. Family pictures are no longer there. My mom's favorite decorations were boxed up and discarded. Claire, though, destroyed me. She held on to Denise as if she were a rescuer. She was not to fault. She needed someone other than me when she was a child. Denise's dominance over everything was unbearable to me. As we grew older, things became worse. By the time I started college, my father had stopped providing financial support. His logic, I had to grow up and take responsibility for my actions. He was lavishing Claire with everything, in the meanwhile, including a brand new apartment, a car, and college tuition. Everything was paid for without hesitation. I was attempting to start an event planning firm from scratch while working part-time jobs and barely making ends meet. Since Claire was the family's star, doing well in school, and seemingly deserving of all their love, Denise naturally rejected it as play. I finally had enough. I severed links with my own family after years of feeling alienated. No major altercation, No significant repercussions, nothing but quiet. I stopped visiting and contacting, and I concentrated on starting a new life. I gave my everything to my work, and to be honest, I flourished. I was now in a position where I didn't need anyone, and my business expanded beyond my wildest dreams. Not Denise, not Claire, not Dad. This leads us back to the invitation for the wedding. I wanted to throw it in the garbage at first. Why should I give a damn? When I was having trouble in school and barely making ends meet to purchase groceries, they showed no concern for me. When a family was required. But I was halted by something. Curiosity, perhaps. Perhaps that was Claire's note. I was unable to determine if she was sincere or whether this was simply another ploy by Denise. In any case, I chose to go. I reasoned that I could at least show up, observe how things developed, and go if things became intolerable. The thing is this, I didn't intend to be without anything, even after years of hostility. I still wanted to show Claire some affection. I offered to assist with her wedding planning and to provide her with my company's entire range of services at a significant savings. She declined courteously, stating that Denise had already handled everything. That's partially completed. To tell the truth, I did my share. I had offered an olive branch. I was there getting ready for the big day since they had the ball. I told myself it was worth it, even though I knew entering that place would reopen many past hurts. Claire could have been honest. Perhaps this was her attempt to reach out and make things right. Despite my low expectations, I managed to keep a glimmer of optimism. I had trouble sleeping the night before the wedding. The old memories started coming back. Holidays when Claire had all the attention and I sat on the sidelines. Denise's disparaging remarks about me in front of my father. There were times when I became aware that I was no longer a member of the family. It didn't matter, I told myself. Not for them, but for Claire, I was attending the wedding. And I could always leave if things didn't work out. I had no one to prove anything to. I dressed in my finest suit, got into my car, and drove to the location the following morning. Well, I'm just like that, so I got there early. I am a planner. It has always been. It was an amazing location. Luxurious flowers, high ceilings, the works. They had obviously not cut any corners. I had a mixture of anxiety and uneasiness as I entered the building. I hadn't seen my family in over 10 years until now. Would they accept me? Tear me apart or ignore me? I didn't know. Claire was glowing when I saw her. She approached me, hugged me tightly, and expressed her gratitude for my attendance. Okay, maybe this won't be that horrible, I thought for a second. Then I noticed Denise. She was standing far, keeping a close eye on me. I could tell she wasn't glad I was there since her grin didn't extend to her eyes. Greetings. Her voice was brimming with phony sweetness as she spoke. You're still operating your little party business? I grinned back, gritting my teeth. Thanks, it's doing well. She grinned and looked at someone else, obviously unimpressed. Denise classic. I found my seat and shrugged it off. It was a lovely ceremony. That is what I'll offer them. I temporarily forgot about the anxiety since Claire seemed so joyful, but I knew deep down that the calm wouldn't last. After all, this was my family. There would inevitably be drama. A knot in my gut tightened as I entered the reception area. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't the location. The location was breathtaking. The chandelier had a magazine-like sheen about it. The floral arrangements looked like they were sent in from paradise, and the silverware on the tables was so shiny that I could see my reflection in it. No, the decor had nothing to do with the tie. It came from the inevitable. I knew what to expect because this was the first time I had confronted my family in over 7 years. I walked over to the seating chart and looked for my name on the list. When I discovered it, the knot in my gut became a sinking sensation. Table 14. I knew where that was without a map. Weddings are essentially a template. Prime tables with immediate family, then close companions, next extended family. Lastly, the sporadic stragglers. We don't care whether you're here was the dominant attitude at table 14. I discovered the insult wasn't subtle when I arrived. My dinner companions were distant family members. I hardly remembered Uncle Roger, who talked endlessly about his coin collection at every family get-together, and Aunt Lydia, who always mispronounced my name and smelled like mothballs. I had no idea who the other two individuals at the table were. In the meantime, I noticed Denise's family and Claire's friends huddled close to the dance floor. Naturally enjoying their status as self-appointed, very important people, Dad and Denise were the center of attention. It was impossible for me not to laugh. This was exactly what they needed. They made it obvious that I was an afterthought, even after we had not spoken for 7 years. All right. The seating arrangement wasn't the reason I came here. Claire was the reason I came. I told myself anyway. I made an effort to remain calm. I made a glass of water for myself, looked around the room, and acted as though I wasn't bothered. However, the evening's first landmine approached my table directly. Dad. And he was obviously intoxicated. I could tell now that this would not be a friendly encounter. When Dad drinks, he doesn't act pleasant. He acts in a loud, impolite, and wholly inappropriate manner. As expected, Aunt Lydia jumped when he slammed his hand on the table. "Matt, what on earth are you doing here?" He made a slur. "You were not expected to attend." Stunned, I gazed at him. I received an invitation. I said, attempting to seem calm. As evidence, I even took it out of my pocket. I was invited by Claire. He gave a snort. "You ought to have remained in your proper place. You're just come to disgrace us, aren't you? Showing up with your little party business like it means something." His shouting was becoming stronger, and I could feel eyes turning toward us. My cheeks heated with a mix of fury and embarrassment, but I stayed quiet. Before I could react, Denise was by his side. Perfectly timed as always. "Matt," she remarked in a mockingly worried tone, "is that outfit rented, or do you even have the money to buy it?" She smirked at me as though she had just given the greatest joke ever. There was no sense, I thought, as I glanced at her and then back to Dad. People like them are impossible to argue with, especially when they are intoxicated and feeling superior to others. I thus took the only action possible. "Excuse me," I said, as I straightened my suit and got up. I left without saying anything more. But I didn't immediately go to the door. I went outdoors to the terrace because I needed a time to myself. I briefly felt as though I could breathe again because of the cold night air, but my ears continued to ring with the sounds from within. Shame. A little party. God, they had to destroy me before they would even allow me to exist. I stared out at the garden while leaning on the railing, unsure of what to do next. Go and don't return. Go back inside and act like I didn't care. It didn't seem right either way. As soon as I heard the music, I was deep in meditation. Go inside and get started. Cheerful and optimistic, totally contrary to my feelings. I knew then that I couldn't remain. I knew nothing about these folks, least of all, my energy or time. I looked at the event workers as I walked back inside, staying close to the room's perimeter to avoid being seen. I couldn't help but appreciate their efficiency as they arranged dishes for the following meal. They reminded me of someone. It dawned on me when I slowed down and observed their movements. These were folks I knew. These were no ordinary employees. They worked for me. My thoughts were racing. It turns out that this wedding was one of the jobs of a smaller event planning firm that my company had recently bought. It makes sense why the arrangement appears so well executed. The task was being done by my team. I had a weird spectrum of feelings, including astonishment, pride, and most importantly, an increasing sense of irony. My firm had been engaged by Claire and Denise without their knowledge, or perhaps they were aware of it and chose to ignore it. In any case, there had just been a significant change in the balance of power, and for the first time during the evening, I felt in control. I took a step aside, took out my phone, and called my operations manager. I spoke quietly when she responded. I said, "Hey, quick question. Are we organizing this wedding?" A pause occurred. Next, yes. Why I couldn't contain my laughter. "No reason," I responded. "I just wanted to make sure." I hung up and stood there, still in shock that my staff was organizing the wedding, staring back at the room. The idea that I had just been humiliated hit me like a freight train. Everything. My firm was in charge of the flowers, the lighting, and the precisely planned dinner service. Perhaps unintentionally, Claire and Denise had engaged me to make their ideal wedding a reality. I was torn between screaming and laughing. There was part of me that wanted to barge back in and say, "Hey, guess what? All of this, I own it." However, my more analytical side recognized there was a better approach to deal with this. Dad and Denise had made a special effort to make fun of me after all. If they didn't want me there treating me as though I didn't belong, they certainly didn't merit my team's labor. With trembling palms, I contacted my operations manager once more. The adrenaline, not the terror. I tried to sound calm as I said, "Hey, Kate, could you verify the client's agreement for this evening?" "Yes, Matt," she said, obviously perplexed. "Why, later, I will explain. Please let me know if the standard termination clause is included in the contract." Kate didn't even need to research it. "Yes, we have the right to immediately cancel services if there is hostile or discriminatory behavior directed at management or employees." Bingo. Excellent. A smile began to appear on my face as I spoke. "We're calling upon it. Get packing." She paused, and I could almost hear the thoughts racing through her mind. "Hold on, what took place?" she inquired. "Is everything all right?" "Let's say the client has made it clear that neither we nor they want us here," I said. "Later I'll tell you more. Just have faith in me." Kate didn't think twice. "I understand, I'll take care of it." I ended the call. My heart is racing. It was this. Dad and Denise were going to get a harsh awakening if they believed they could treat me like garbage and yet take pleasure in the results of my labor. I wasn't acting spitefully. A little perhaps, but primarily because it seemed like the appropriate thing to do. I wasn't going to allow them to take advantage of my labors and treat me disrespectfully. It wasn't intimate. It has to do with business. The gathering was underway back inside. Servers were bringing out the first course, guests were chatting, and music was playing. On the surface, everything appeared to be ideal, but I knew that chaos was on the horizon. My staff worked like a well-oiled machine, maintaining appearances while covertly loading up supplies and equipment. At first, nothing caught the attention of the guests, which demonstrated their expertise. I remained outside and observed the plan's development from the terrace. My group started gently removing decorations, folding up tablecloths, and removing flower arrangements. Watching a magician make a whole room vanish without anybody noticing was like that. Denise may have been able to disparage me, but she was powerless to change the caliber of my work or my staff. When the lighting team began taking down the other lights in the room, it was the first indication that something was off. No one has yet spoken, but a few visitors have noticed and are pointing and muttering to one another. Naturally, Denise was too preoccupied with maintaining her position at her table to notice what was going on. Dad had disappeared, most likely nursing another drink. And the rumors became louder as more and more decorations vanished. At last, one of the waiters approached Denise and spoke to her. In a few seconds, her expression changed from smug to angry. She leaped out of her seat and strode across the room, the sound of heels hitting the marble floor like gunfire. She was audible from the terrace. "What's happening? For what reason are they removing everything?" The waiter seems truly frightened. "I'm not sure, ma'am. The event management will need to be consulted." She saw Kate at that moment quietly leading the crew. Denise rushed over her, screaming, growing louder by the second. "What is this? Why on earth are you doing this?" Kate didn't recoil. "Ma'am, we are adhering to the conditions of the contract. Due to antagonistic behavior toward our management services are being discontinued." Denise blinked. "What hostile actions? Who is your management anyway?" Kate pointed to where I stood on the terrace. When Denise noticed me, she turned and her eyes narrowed. I waved at her a little. I tried to seem as impartial as I could. Her cheeks flushed with anger, she dashed outside. "You," she gave a hiss. "This is not possible. This is my firm and this is Claire's wedding." I answered in a composed tone. "You have already shown that you don't appreciate me or my work. What makes you seek my services then?" Her mouth fell open. "Are you punishing me with this to spoil Claire's nuptials?" I gave a headshake. "It has nothing to do with Claire. It has to do with how you and Dad handled me. You can't make fun of me and expect me to deliver excellent service. This isn't how it operates." Denise stammered, attempting to think of anything to say before she did. Kate came over with a clipboard for me. "We're prepared to launch," she declared. "Everything is packed." I gave a nod. "Regards, Kate. Excellent work as always." I didn't stay to see what was going on, but Denise looked like she was about to blow out. I gave her my lawyer's card and advised her to contact our legal team if she had any queries concerning the contract. "Enjoy your evening." I then turned to go, leaving her stunned as she stood there. Even more chaotic than I had expected was the aftermath. The reception area was all but empty by the time my crew arrived. There was still a chandelier hanging from the ceiling, but that was it. No tablecloths, no flowers, and no lighting. The guests were standing about chattering and bewildered. Claire appeared to be about to cry, and for a moment I felt bad for her. But then I told myself that she wasn't the point of this. This has to do with defending myself. It should have been a pleasant journey home after Claire's wedding. I mean, I just put up one of my life's most iconic mic drops. But I couldn't help but feel confused as my team's truck's taillights vanished from my rearview mirror. I didn't think the day would go like this. I knew I had made the correct decision, though. I defended myself as a person and as a company owner for the first time in a long time. Even though the evening didn't turn out the way I had anticipated, I wasn't going to let that deter me from continuing. This was only the start. The consequences started fairly quickly, though, so I didn't have much time to think about it. About 20 minutes into my trip, my phone gave me the first hint of pandemonium. Voicemails, missed calls, and text messages are all coming in at once. As expected, Denise spearheaded the attack with a barrage of irate texts. They were lengthy and wordy, full of charges that I had wrecked Claire's special day out of spite and damaged everything. They were all more dramatic than the others. "It's unbelievable what you did to Claire," she began. "You're a nasty, self-centered youngster who can't tolerate happiness in others. The reputation of this family was destroyed by you. Are you aware of the humiliating nature of this?" She wasn't finished, though. The messages continued, each one more bizarre than the one before it. She said I was envious and ruined the wedding, called me sad, and even insisted that I reimburse the full event fee. Indeed, reimbursement. As though she had some moral superiority, she sincerely thought I should reimburse her for the services my firm had previously rendered. "This whole family is embarrassed by you," she added. "Are you aware of what others are now saying about us? I should have realized that I shouldn't have trusted you with anything significant. Matt, you are and always will be a failure." It was almost comical how bold they were. I simply muted her number without replying. My energy wasn't worth her. Dad followed closely following. His voicemails were just as caustic, but less well organized. "Let's just say the word is selfish brat, and I'll sue your ass. I won't get into the specifics. Highly featured." I honestly laughed when they threatened to call the police at one point. Why call the police violating a contract that he was unaware of? "I wish you luck in your endeavor." However, Claire's message was the most unexpected. It wasn't what I expected when I finally read her text, even though I had expected her to be angry. "Why would you harm me in this way?" she composed. "I assumed you were here to help me. I didn't anticipate that you would spoil my wedding." Oh no, I wasn't prepared for how hard that one hit. It wasn't like Dad's inebriated outbursts or Denise's poison. This was real hurt. Even though Claire and I hadn't spoken for years, I could still sense the hurt in her voice. She clearly didn't comprehend why I had chosen that course of action. I did, and to be honest, I didn't hold her responsible. The center of this disaster had always been Claire. Dad wasn't the type of parent who promoted independent thought, and Denise had claws in her from an early age. Claire had been raised in the same poisonous atmosphere from which I had fled. But rather than resisting it, she had become accustomed to it. I wanted to answer her to provide my side of the story. But I wasn't convinced for a moment that it would change anything. I pondered whether I had erred, but then I recalled why I had first called. The scenario worsened the following morning. As usual, Denise was unable to let it go. She began fabricating stories to support her claims and referring to everyone who would listen as relatives, friends, or others. 2 aunts and a cousin had already texted me before lunchtime. Everyone is asking me to clarify what actually transpired. to avoid doing the same thing over and over again. I sent a general text message to the few relatives I still appear to have. In short, I trusted. I received contempt insults and outsider treatment. Thus, in accordance with the conditions of the contract, I ended my company's services. Ask Denise any questions you may have. Ask the venue workers if you want the truth. I finished my self-defense. Almost instantly, one of my aunts replied. "Well done," she wrote. "5 years ago at Thanksgiving, we witnessed Denise's treatment of you. She has always treated you horribly. I apologize that Claire was caught in the midst. I was surprised by her support. I hadn't even entertained the idea that any of my relatives may be on my side, since I had spent so many years believing they had written me off. In the midst of a storm, it provided a little solace." Next followed the unanticipated backlash from the visitors. I began receiving emails and queries by the afternoon, business questions. It seems that some of the wedding guests had heard about what had transpired, and several of them expressed admiration for the way my crew had managed the matter. One individual, who I barely recall being Claire's in-laws' family friend, contacted me to express her admiration for my staff's professionalism. She commented, "I just wanted to say your team handled everything with incredible grace after hearing what happened. It was obvious that the family, not your business, was the problem. If you're free in a few months, I'd love to collaborate with you on a charity gala. There is a bright side." I replied right away, expressing my gratitude for her nice remarks, and scheduling a meeting to talk about the occurrence. In a few hours, other visitors had sent me 3 additional emails that were identical. It seemed unreal. I was now using the same wedding that I had been accused of spoiling as free advertising for my company. Denise's efforts to make me seem bad had failed miserably. Denise wasn't finished, of course. She had taken her campaign against me online by the evening. I found out that she had written a negative internet evaluation of my business, calling us unprofessional and untrustworthy. There were several plain falsehoods in the review, alleging that we had come late, offered subpar service, and abruptly left the event. Fortunately, I had anticipated this. I called my lawyer right away, and we issued Denise a stop and desist letter a few hours later, telling her that any more false remarks would be considered defamatory. The next day, the review was taken down, and from what I understand, she hasn't attempted to write anything else since Denise seemed to have decided to take her entitled outburst to the next level. My lawyer called me the next morning while I was going through my emails. "This one will be a hit with you." With a tone full of cynicism, she began. "For violation of contract, Claire's family is threatening to sue you." In fact, I burst out laughing. "You're joking." I said, "For what reasons?" My lawyer said, "They're saying you left the event and damaged Claire's wedding irreparably. In addition to further damages for mental suffering, they are requesting a complete refund." I nearly spat out my coffee at the ridiculousness of it. Suffering on an emotional level. Because I upheld an agreement they made. It's really wealthy. My attorney laughed. "Matt, don't worry. This is just an attempt to terrify people." A very ambiguous letter without any details was issued by their lawyer, if you can even call him that. They have no leg to stand on, yet I'll write a response. Denise's litigation effort proceeded to the next absurd phase a few days later. Another letter was received by their attorney, who I subsequently found out was one of Dad's poker friends, alleging that my choice to end services had resulted in both serious financial loss and public embarrassment. He also included some exaggerated figures for the purported worth of the food and event decor, the finest aspect. In addition, I was charged in the letter with being spiteful and malevolent for removing the decorations. It stated that the plaintiff's family endured public humiliation during the occasion. The host's social status suffered irreversible damage, and their reputation was damaged by the sudden termination of event services. As I read that, I couldn't stop giggling. Denise was sincerely attempting to portray herself as the victim in a situation that she had completely made up. You could cut the irony with a knife because it was so thick, but my lawyer was far less amused. They're attempting to see what sticks by hurling mud at the wall. At our subsequent conversation, she stated, "The notion that you broke the contract is the foundation of their entire argument. However, the sentence you cited is unchangeable. I'll give a formal response and let them know that pursuing this further will just be a waste of time and money. For over 2 weeks, the legal back and forth continued. Their lawyer probably didn't have the courage to tell them they had no chance of winning, but Denise and Dad persisted. In the meantime, my attorney was gathering all the evidence in the background. We have to put a permanent end to this. We had it everything. The termination clause was explicitly included in the initial contract that Claire signed. The piece de resistance surveillance footage from the venue, as well as witness testimonies from my employees who were there when Denise's aggressive remarks were uttered. Everything was caught on tape, even Dad's inebriated outburst, and Denise's criticism of my team once their lawyer saw the film. The case fell apart almost immediately. In a last letter, my lawyer detailed the facts in agonizing detail and warned them that we will countersue for defamation and legal expenses if they persisted in pursuing the case. My lawyer sent me an email 2 days later. The case has been dropped. Nothing further needs to be done. However, the most unexpected backlash came from Claire's new husband. A few days after the wedding, he gave me a call. I almost didn't answer, but I finally picked up out of curiosity. "Hello, Matt." His voice was unsteady as he spoke. He went on, "I know Claire wants to talk to you. Everything makes her feel awful. I don't know, she's simply afraid. She is upset because she is caught between you and Denise." I let out a sigh. "I understand, however, she must speak if she wants to. I'm not going to go looking for her. He said I'll tell her." I hung up with an odd sense of optimism. Perhaps there was still hope for Claire and me to make amends. Perhaps not. In any case, I had at last advocated for myself, and in my opinion, that was a victory. Claire texted me a few weeks after the pandemonium subsided. "Can we get together? I think we should have a conversation." Uncertain of how to react, I gazed at the message for a considerable amount of time. On the one hand, it was Claire contacting me, the same Claire who had remained mute during her wedding humiliation by Denise and Dad. Claire, who had witnessed my business, which I had started from nothing, being humiliated, remained silent as I left. However, I was unable to get rid of the persistent uncertainty. Now, what was it she wanted from me? Was she only trying to make things better for herself? Or was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation? Against my better judgment, I consented to meet her. "Yes," I said. "Tell me where and when." I used to frequent a tiny cafe when I first started my business, and that's where we met. As I entered, I couldn't help but notice the tension in the air, even though it was neutral ground. Claire was already arrived enjoying a cup of coffee. She raised her head and grinned, but it was a clumsy forced smile that fell short of her eyes. "Hey," she remarked, motioning me to have a seat. I took the seat across from her and said, "Hey." She paused for a long moment before continuing. She started by saying, "I sincerely apologize for everything that occurred at the wedding. I'm aware that Denise and Dad said some inappropriate things, and it got completely out of control." I arched an eyebrow. "A few things." She moved in her chair uneasily. "Well, a lot of things, but you must realize that they were under stress. There is a lot of strain and a lot of emotion at weddings. It wasn't intimate." I laughed resentfully. "Not intimate. Claire, I was referred to as an embarrassment. They essentially told me I shouldn't have been there, made fun of my company, and denigrated me. Isn't that personal?" She let out a sigh as though I were the one acting irrationally. "Look, I'm not saying that what they did was correct, but it wasn't fair that you pulled out in that manner. Matt, you destroyed the reception. People are still discussing it. It was there. The true motivation behind her want to speak." I stated my tone thus. "This has nothing to do with anything they said or did. This relates to your appearance." "I'm not saying that at all." Although the guarded tone in her voice suggested so, she responded promptly. "Simply put, I believe there was another way you could have handled it. What Denise and Dad said didn't mean you had to punish everyone." I looked at her, wondering if she was repeating Denise's story, or if she truly believed what she was saying. "Shame on you all," I repeated Claire. "My company was recruited. In front of everyone, they made fun of me, the owner. They didn't even try to conceal their contempt. Is it your expectation that I will simply accept it?" she said. "I thought you would think about someone besides yourself. It has nothing to do with you. I got married. You have no idea how embarrassing that was when everything went wrong. I was asked what had happened, and I was at a loss for words. While you simply walked away, I had to face with the consequences. Stunned, I reclined in my chair. Is that the purpose of this? Not what they did, not the way they handled me. It concerns the inconvenience it caused you. That's unfair, she remarked, raising her voice a little. You're making it hard for me to repair this. Make it right, I said it again. You haven't even recognized what I've been through, Claire. Because it didn't fit into your idealized wedding story, you're sitting here accusing me of sticking up for myself. Are you even able to hear yourself? Her face hardened as she crossed her arms. If you hadn't made everything about you, perhaps I wouldn't have to say this. I wanted you at the wedding, so I invited you. You made my attempt to incorporate you a complete failure. A stab of pain went through my chest. It wasn't melancholy, though. Clarity was the key. There was no miscommunication here. Claire wasn't forced to choose between Dad and Denise. She resembled them exactly. Entitled cunning and unable to accept accountability for her deeds. I got up and covered my coffee with a few dollars that I tossed onto the table. Claire, you know what? I've had enough of you. With Denise, with Dad, everything. This family has made me the scapegoat my whole life, and I'm tired of it. Her gaze expanded. Hold on, Matt. No. I spoke aggressively. This cannot be rewritten by you. I thought perhaps things had changed, so I came to your wedding. However, all I received was the same disregard I've experienced throughout my life. And now you're sitting here accusing me of being foolish enough to leave it. I'm finished. Claire, permanently. As I left the cafe, she sat there in disbelief. I didn't talk to Claire after that. In the days that followed, she texted me a couple times, but I didn't bother answering. Nothing else could be said. I trusted her because she had showed me who she truly was. I decided to remove Denise and Dad out of my life, and it turned out to be the finest choice I'd ever made in the months that followed, due in part to the influx of new customers who were pleased by my team's professionalism. In handling the wedding disaster, my business flourished. Despite their attempts to undermine me, Dad and Denise only strengthened me. Claire, too. She turned become simply another aspect of my history. It didn't matter, so I stopped worrying if she would ever see things differently. Blood is not what defines a family. Respect is at issue. And I had seen none of them. And to be honest, I have no regrets. Story 3. Because I'm too different, my relatives informed me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving. I thus let my parents to manage their own spending and removed them from my payroll. A week before Thanksgiving, on a cold November evening, the phone call was received. I recall this because I had been eagerly preparing my side dish, either my well-known pecan pie or green bean casserole. When my mother's name appeared on my screen, I cheerfully replied, "Hey, Mom," anticipating the customary short conversation regarding my arrival time or travel arrangements. Rather, her tone sounded uncertain and frigid. She stated bluntly, "We think it might be best if you don't come to Thanksgiving this year." I believed I had misheard. As I waited for the punchline, I nearly burst out laughing. What? Why wouldn't I attend? My flight has already been scheduled. I nodded in surprise as I answered. Mom took a deep breath. "Pay attention, my dear. Simply said your grandparents will be present and you are aware of their personalities. They also have Marjorie. We just don't want to see any moments where you're that different. Everyone has a difficult time." Distinct. It hurt like a slap to hear that term. I understood her meaning well. I'd state that I'm gay. Since 3 years ago, I've noticed a slight change in the way some family members perceive me. Nevertheless, I never thought my own parents would reject my invitation to a family event for that reason. "Are you serious?" I tightened my throat and muttered. I felt a mixture of fury and betrayal. I was walking around my living room with my heart pounding. On my mother's end, I could hear her speaking to someone, perhaps my father, who as usual lacked the courage to address me directly. Mom went on to say, "It's just for the best," as though she were helping me. "We can talk over the phone or even over Christmas. There will only be one supper, only one meal." as if spending a holiday with my own family were an unreasonable request. My voice faltered. "I'm your son, Mom. What are you doing?" She let out a sigh, as if annoyed that I didn't simply accept it. "Although you must accept the reality, you are aware of our affection for you. Individuals converse. As your relative pointed out, it may be awkward. At Thanksgiving, we don't want any drama." I understood her meaning well. She was anticipating Grandpa's resentful complaints, or Marjorie's rumors preferring their solace to my presence. That's when I knew she wouldn't move. My existence and presence were a burden and a source of shame. My eyes burned with tears of anguish and rage. "This is how they treat me after everything I've done for them." She said, "Try to understand, okay?" And my silence spoke more than words could. "Some leftovers will be saved for you." I was having trouble breathing. I had a lump in my throat. I hung up without saying anything further. Her final words echoed in my mind as I gazed at my phone. Leftovers. They believed that bits of food and affection should enough for me. I was alone myself in the kitchen of my flat. A wave of contradictory feelings swept over me. Hot anger and deep betrayal. And behind all of that heartbreaking disappointment, my family has always had a hard time accepting me for who I am. However, I never imagined that they would reject me in this way. I put down the phone with trembling hands. I no longer felt the thrill of the holidays. Instead, I felt hollow. I was too different to be invited to my own family's Thanksgiving, too dissimilar to occupy their table. However, they weren't all that different when they required my assistance. It was a horrible irony. This was the last straw. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday, even if I hadn't known it yet. After supper, I used to watch football with Dad and assist Mom in mashing the potatoes. Those pleasant recollections felt tarnished now. My family was celebrating the holiday I loved without me, because they were more concerned with what other people might think than with my presence. As I thought back on that night's sacrifice, I repeatedly played my mother's words to myself. Even though I knew they were worried about me, I was still upset to hear it directly. With my eyes burning, I collapsed onto my couch and began to list all the things I had done for my family over the years. I had given everything I had in the hopes of being accepted. I was the odd one out in our little Ohio town while I was growing up. My parents tried to repair me because I was the bookish, sensitive child who liked to write stories and play with computers more than throwing a football. By enrolling me in Little League and encouraging me to attend school dances, Mom attempted to shape me into her ideal of a typical son, while Dad largely remained on the sidelines and did what she asked. Up until high school, and most crucially to my mother, my younger sister Mandy was the ideal child by default, bright, gregarious, and straight A's. Naturally normal. I always believed that I needed to win my family's affection. I put myself into my studies and was awarded a scholarship to a prestigious university. I finally relocated to New York in order to pursue a lucrative profession in technology. I always thought that if I succeeded, they would be proud enough to ignore the aspects of me that they didn't like. I helped my family when my tech business took off and I became wealthy in my mid-20s. As a surprise for Christmas, I settled their credit card debt. Dad gave me a rare embrace as Mom sobbed with happiness. I believed I had completed it at last, gained their utmost pride at last. In retrospect, our connection became transactional at that point. I became their financial crutch after that. In order to save them from losing the house, I paid the mortgage after Dad was laid off from the workplace. Mandy attended a community college that I funded till she left. To pay my parents' bills, I made a monthly payment into their account. It was not always selfless. I enjoyed that they were in need of me. It seemed like evidence that I had been appreciated for so long. I never demanded anything from them. It didn't bother me, that I believed was the definition of being a good son. My mother used to say that I was a nice son for lending a hand. That praise was my life. Every time the inquiries continued to come in, I disregarded the nagging feeling in my stomach. A bit more for auto repairs, a little money for Mandy's new company, funds to repair the roof's leak. I always delivered. I came out to them after that. I was 27 years old at the time. Even though I wasn't sure how they would react, I was done masking who I was. I came out as queer to them via video conference. Dad was silent, And Mom's grin wavered. Mom's first question was, "Are you sure?" She became worried about the opinions of her neighbors. Dad didn't say much. Simply put, there was a lot to process. Mandy essentially told me via text later that she wasn't shocked. However, that did not imply that she was at ease. I recall sitting there in shock and heartbreak after hanging up that phone. I questioned whether they would ever accept me fully. Nevertheless, I'm hoping that time and my ongoing assistance will help them change their ways. They didn't shout at me or reject me. For the most part, they simply ignored it. Mom said gently, "Let's keep your personal life private around Grandma and Grandpa, okay?" The next time I went home. That was the agreement. As long as I acted like I wasn't gay, I could fit in with the family when it mattered most. I agreed by remaining silent, even though it hurt. I hoped they would soften with time and my continued generosity. I therefore made a concerted effort to be the perfect son in every other way. I tried to help them with any issues they were having, sent more money, and purchased more presents. Perhaps I was attempting to purchase the unwavering love I ought to have received already. Though courteous gratitude was given for each gesture, nothing else changed. We never discussed my dating life or the embarrassing way I presented my long-term partner to them as my roommate. My parents never stood up for me, and I laughed off offensive comments that certain relatives made around me. To keep them comfortable, I felt like I had to tread carefully, and I continued to give. My parents began to look to me for assistance, as if it were their right. They had casually brought up bills and costs, and I had offered money which was politely acknowledged, but soon forgotten. As I reflected on that painful evening, I saw that my financial assistance had devolved into a one-sided agreement. They tolerated me in exchange for my payment. When it was expedient, it was tolerated, but not embraced. I considered particular moments. I saved them. Things that seemed like manipulation now, but had seemed like love, was dubbed a lifesaver and prevented the foreclosure of the residence. I was then instructed to keep it a secret. Covered Mandy's auto repair costs following her collision. Without even inviting me to her birthday celebration, she thanked me and left for a trip with friends. The next month, sent monthly payments comparable to Dad's previous salary. However, they never really tried to get back on their feet. At the time, I dismissed each of those occurrences, but now I recognize them as indications that my generosity was being taken for granted. I was still the family's secret, an embarrassment to be concealed when it mattered most, despite all that compassion. I felt ill at the realization. I threw up before I had even reached the restroom. As I stared at myself in the mirror, my gut churned with fury and betrayal. I seemed as exhausted as I felt afterward. I loved my sister and my parents, but they had too many restrictions attached to their love for me. At last, they had said the silent portion aloud. If I didn't follow their guidelines, I wasn't welcome. At Thanksgiving, they told me I wasn't welcome. All right, why was I going out of my way to support them financially if, in their view, I wasn't really a member of the family? At that point, my self-pity gave way to resolution. Even if I might not be accepted by them, I definitely had the ability to quit supporting their duplicity. For the way they treated me, I owed them nothing. If nothing else, they owed their own survival and an apology to me. It was enough, cutting them off rather than taking a plane home. I stayed in New York that Wednesday. I ended up spending Thanksgiving at my friend Jason's house. I was greeted warmly by his large, energetic family. In sharp contrast to my own parents' icy silence, their laughing and conversation made me feel warm and welcome. The more Jason's family treated me with compassion, the more I was hurt by what my own family had done. When everyone gathered around the table to express their gratitude, I just said, "friends," hoping my voice wouldn't break. I was terribly conscious of my purpose and very thankful to be there. I was rather silent, but I made an effort to savor the food and the warmth, deep in contemplation. Later that evening, when the most of the visitors had departed, Jason observed, "We sipped beers while sitting in his living room." At last, Jason said what he had been keeping to himself all night. "This whole thing is just nonsense, you know." I was able to smirk. "Describe it to me." He gave a headshake. "Getting energized for me?" "No, really. Your parents treat you this way even though you do much too much for them. relying on you in every way, then instructing you not to arrive. That is incorrect. I let out a long sigh. My parents are still there. Family matters. It's not easy. He stated plainly that being family does not give you the right to treat someone like a doormat. To be honest, they had been going over that boundary for years, and you let them too. I opened my mouth to protest, but my lips remained closed. I knew that he was correct. I had already spoken to Jason about some of the requests for money and guilt trips. His advice has always been mild since he didn't want to offend my family. But it was clear to me that he had stopped holding back. You're worthy of better. He put a hand on my shoulder and went on. Perhaps it's time to confront them. Don't allow them to exploit you. It was shocking to hear someone else say it out when I had been too scared to completely acknowledge it. I realized I had been justifying and defending their actions for far too long. I nodded slowly. Yes, the moment has come. Back in my solitary apartment that night, I felt oddly at ease. I had already made up my mind when my mother had refused to invite me. My intellect was now catching up, though. I had to interrupt them. Not to be mean, but to finally establish a line that ought to have been there from the beginning. Reaching for my phone, I launched my banking app. The planned automatic transfer to my parents was hovered over by my finger. The first of the month was the due date. Their mortgage, utilities, and other necessities were paid for with that money. They depended on it. If I abruptly stopped, would that hurt them? Most likely the disdainful thoughts of Mom. There will only be one supper. I became more determined. I canceled the transfer. A confirmation appeared. The transfer was annulled. As simple as that. My parents were no longer on my payroll. My heart thumping in my ears. I put down the phone with trembling hands. I knew there was no turning back now, so I felt both ecstatic and afraid at the same time. It was like getting off a moving train, shocking and freeing all at once. I sat in my living room in the dark. For the first time in years, I feel the rush of adrenaline. Money did not bind me to them. Naturally, there was no quick response. I experienced a few days of calm, but the storm arrived as soon as December 1st arrived and the money didn't appear in their account. My phone rang early on a Saturday morning. On the screen is Dad. He seldom ever gave me a call. Mom was often in charge of everything. I realized then that something was wrong. I responded, steeling myself. He didn't even greet me. What on earth is happening? He let out a bark. After being denied at the store, your mother's card was hit. The cash never entered. My mouth was abruptly dry, so I swallowed. I responded, I canceled the transfer. He remained quiet for a moment. Did you cancel it? Why? He sounded truly perplexed, as though the thought of halting the money itself was incomprehensible. It was surprisingly even as I spoke. Because, Dad, I'm done. I will no longer continue to cover all expenses, particularly after being informed that I'm not welcome at family gatherings. What are you discussing? He lost his temper. That money is what we rely on. In what way are we to live? You don't simply snuck your family under the rug. This is how you pay us back for everything we've done for you. I lost my patience. Everything you have done for me. Let's be honest. Dad, I've been covering your expenses because you haven't found employment since your layoff. I covered Mandy's college expenses. The house was saved by me. In exchange, you all treat me as though I'm a secret. I'm not your ATM. I'm your son. My money isn't acceptable if I'm not accepted as a son. Watch what you say, he snarled. We are your parents. Be respectful. The irony almost made me chuckle. It takes both parties to show respect. Lately, you haven't showed me much. Dad got into a fight, but I was winning. The hurt that had been within was leaking out. Right now. After Mom urged me to stop, did you really believe I would continue to pay the bills, Dad? You gave me a weird feeling. As though my value is solely based on my financial gain. He muttered that I didn't grasp the Thanksgiving scenario, and that Mom came up with the notion to keep the grandparents happy. He attempted to change the subject to their financial difficulties, particularly over the holidays. I didn't move. I apologize if this causes you hardship, but perhaps it will show you that I am worth more than just my salary. I need to look after myself, even if I love you and my mother. I have no intention of hurting you. I'm taking action because I can't tolerate this treatment any longer. You're simply leaving your family behind, he fired back. Just before Christmas, there was a frantic edge to his voice. Are you aware of the extent of your mother's distress that struck a chord? But I didn't back down. Mom chose to leave me out, which upset her. I hope you both managed to work things out. Perhaps it's time for you to take charge of your life. I've helped you enough. I withdrew the phone from my ear while he continued to rant. Heart-thumping, I hung up in the middle of my tirade. I cherished my parents. This was quite difficult because of that, but I was unable to carry on as before. He tried phoning back right away. Mom then made an attempt. Exhausted, but experiencing an odd calm, I put my phone on quiet and cuddled up on the couch. I became aware that I was shedding tears of relief and frustration. Cutting them off was painful, but I felt liberated at the same time. Yes, I did. Fallout. It was not warmly received by them. That much was clear. Within a few hours, the voicemails began to flood in. Mom was crying that I was destroying the family, and her voice was a mixture of rage and sadness. One moment, Dad apologized in his text, then the next, he reprimanded me for abandoning my own blood. Enjoy watching us struggle was all that Mandy wrote in her text. I hope it was worthwhile. I replied to Mandy in the most composed manner possible. Nobody should have to fight in my opinion. I simply want everyone to know how much I've been going through and how devastated I was. If you ever want to have a real conversation, I'm available. For the first 2 evenings, she didn't read to me. I'm not going to lie. I struggled with guilt. I didn't get much sleep. I once caught myself looking at old family pictures on my phone. We were all grinning around the table at Thanksgiving last year, but I started crying. Would we ever have that kind of smile again? Waves of guilt swept over me. However, I then recall why I had to do this action. Each time my eyes are closed, I would envision their inability to buy groceries or see Mom sobbing. I nearly lost it when I felt the need to call and apologize and to make things right by giving the money back. I would then play back the terrible call I got from Mom advising me not to attend Thanksgiving. I always had the same expression on my face, which was a combination of grief and resolve as seen through the dark bedroom window. For my own dignity, I had to take this action. We had yet to communicate beyond those antagonistic texts by the middle of December. The quiet standoff was something I accepted. A part of me was sad. The familial connection seems to have been genuinely broken. However, I also felt justified. It had been a long time since I had to do this. At last I had. Then they arrived on Christmas Eve. It was around 8 p.m. I was at home preparing to eat Chinese takeaway and watch a movie. My apartment's buzzer allegedly went off without warning as I opened the door, making it my new Christmas Eve ritual. I went cold. My sister and mother were standing in the hallway. Mom had crimson rims around her eyes. Her shoulders were slumped as though she was waiting for me to shout, and she appeared to have not slept in days. Mandy refused to look at me as I stared at the ground. I was in complete shock. I remained still. I was attempting to stabilize myself while my heart pounded. At last, I moved aside and whispered, "Enter." They entered cautiously. Mom surveyed my home. It was most likely the first time she had experienced my New York lifestyle. Mandy also hovered close to the entrance, crossed arms. In my little living room, we sat down in an uncomfortable triangle. Mom, Mandy, and I were sitting side by side on the sofa in the armchair. Years of unsaid grudges and quiet filled the distance between us. Mom was the first to speak, her voice shaking. "We wanted to visit you even though it's Christmas Eve and it's late. We came here because you didn't come home," Mandy said in an almost defensive manner. I inhaled deeply while attempting to speak evenly. To be honest, I didn't feel welcome at home. Mom flinched. "At Christmas, I never said you weren't welcome." After being instructed not to attend Thanksgiving, I arched an eyebrow. "Did you honestly think I would show up for Christmas as if nothing had happened? You didn't call to tell me differently." She lowered her gaze to her hands. I suppose I had no idea how to. She wiped away the tear that slid down her cheek. James, I really apologize for everything. I sat up taller since I hadn't anticipated that admission so soon. I apologize for everything. Covers a large area. Would you mind being specific? When she asked you not to attend Thanksgiving, she swallowed hard. That was incorrect. Mandy's voice was quiet. It was a mess. We are aware. Mom went on, her voice trailing off. I persuaded myself that I was attempting to keep your grandparents from being upset. If you didn't have to deal with their remarks, I figured it could be simpler for you. However, I was deluding myself. In reality, I was just acting like a coward. I should have stood up for you, but I didn't. I released a breath that I had been suppressing without realizing it. More than anything, they could have said it was painful. Mom, she gave a nod. I'm crying now. I see it now. I know. I've seen a lot of things in the past several weeks without you. Mandy's eyes were softer than before when she gazed at me. You were missed, and not only due to the financial gain. Mom winced when money was brought up. Uncle Ron gave us a loan so we could survive. Telling him why we were short was embarrassing. We haven't disclosed the incident to anybody else. You had to work through the holidays, that's all. She stopped and took a trembling breath. James, it's not about the money, or at the very least, it goes beyond that. It concerns us. As she talked, a knot formed in my throat. I had never heard my mother discuss our relationship so bluntly. She continued cautiously. I realized that we were losing you, that we might have already lost you, and that it was our fault. She grabbed my hand as she reached across. Her hand was shaking and chilly. Sweetheart, I don't want to lose you. What people think no longer matters to me. All I want is my son. Tears clouded my view. I also don't want to lose any of you. I can't continue living the same way, though. Inside, I was dying. Leaning forward, Mandy uncrossed her arms. Speak quietly. We were terrible. I was terrible, too. You were taken for granted by us. You were taken for granted by me. She nibbled on her lip. You know I must have been jealous. It was you who succeeded. You always gave me the impression that your parents were proud of whatever you accomplished. However, they subsequently act as though you should feel embarrassed of who you are. I can't even begin to understand how perplexing it must have been for you. Something in my chest relaxed as I heard my sister sob. Despite being too different and a few years apart, she and I were really close growing up, and I was unaware that she was dealing with her own complex feelings. I felt as though I had to purchase my position within the family. Even then, I was only permitted to be there as long as I complied with your regulations, I added softly. Mom, still crying, gripped my hand. I apologize for my error. We were mistaken. On Christmas Eve, my mother sat on my sofa and gave the shaky-voiced apology I had dreamed about. I took a time to let it sink in by closing my eyes. Mom went on, I'm not asking you to forgive us right away. I want to attempt to make this better. Whatever it takes, we'll do it. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. When I opened my eyes, I noticed that they were both nervously observing me. Here, right now, I was in control. I wasn't used to feeling that way around my relatives. A bigger part of me was relieved, but a smaller part of me wanted to snap and ask why it took so long for them to treat me like a son. I also want to fix it. Slowly, I said, however true change must occur, I will no longer hide who I am. Stop treating me as though I'm a cause for shame. Furthermore, I will no longer be paying for anything. If there's an emergency, I'll assist. However, you must attempt to stand on your own 2 feet. Tell me we will, Mom said right away. We have already begun to reduce. Additionally, your dad is discussing a job with an old buddy. We will work things out. I don't want you to think that we're just after your money. Yes, Mandy said, dabbing at her nose. For the time being, I work part-time at a shop, but I can't just sit around and hope you'll save me. It's unfair. That caught me off guard. It gave me a little smile. That's excellent. To be honest, I'm happy to hear that. We spoke more slowly as we navigated this uncharted open space. Mom acknowledged that Dad had made the decision not to attend. He still didn't want to face me because he was too upset and maybe ashamed. That was painful, but I knew he would have to change his mind if at all. Not everything was kumbaya. It was like lancing a boil, albeit there were a few rough times and old patterns coming in. Ugly but essential to begin the healing process. We had the rudiments of comprehension by the end of the discussion. They spent around 1.5 hours there. It was a beginning, but we didn't finish everything. Mom had me take the cookie tin as they were getting up to go. "I created your fave." "As if that could erase the past," she remarked. At the door, however, the gesture was significant. "Everybody hunts, an actual sincere embrace." Mom whispered for a long time, "You have my undying love." I gave her a hug in return and said, "I love you." Mandy even whispered and gave me a hug. "Merry Christmas, my friend, and we appreciate you allowing us to correct the situation." In addition to wishing her a Merry Christmas, I gave her a hug. After leading them out, I had a remarkable sense of lightness as I shut the door. Although the event was genuine, it was by no means a classic movie ending. They appeared to genuinely comprehend, or at the very least to be attempting to achieve true freedom and harmony. I watched soft snowflakes cascade down to the quiet downtown street while drinking a cup of hot chocolate beside my window for the remainder of Christmas Eve. I opened the window and let the cold air to touch my face, as though the universe were taking a moment to allow me to comprehend how everything had altered. The city seemed strangely quiet. Mom texted me this time and my phone buzzed. Just a plain Merry Christmas. Finally, we returned to the motel. "We appreciate you speaking with us. I cherish you." Then came a heart emoji. I answered that it was something she had never sent me before. "Happy Christmas. I also love you." "Tell Dad I hope he's okay," I said. "When he's ready to chat, I'm available." She should show him that message, I hoped. I also didn't want to spend Christmas Day alone. I had promised to come over for brunch with Jason and Priya, and I knew I would be able to enjoy it without that dreadful knot in my stomach. I was traveling into the future with individuals that cherished me for who I was. The toughest thing I've ever done was to stand up to my family, but it taught me that I should be respected. It was all worth the hard-won information. Whatever happened next, it cost. I knew that no one could take away my independence and sense of value which I had regained. It wasn't the ideal conclusion to a holiday film. There was no lavish family feast when everyone was immediately pardoned. However, everything was genuine and belonged to us. That would be preferable to a Hallmark card any day before I fell asleep. I noticed that I was grinning. I experienced a genuine feeling on Christmas morning that I hadn't had in a long time. Free.